I'll keep you posted as the news comes in to me. Hope no one else gets lost out there in the fog.
Nice hearing from you, Carlos.
Most people's introduction to the works of John Carpenter and Debra Hill has been through the slasher masterpiece Halloween. However, some of us, or rather maybe just me, started our foray into the works of the masters with The Fog. Why with The Fog? Well, because its box art was appealing and it was available at the video store while Halloween was always out. To be honest, my first watch of The Fog was kind of by default of having nothing else to rent. That being said, I rented just about every single horror film and action film available within walking distance, and I lived in a video store heavy neighborhood. Being a high schooler at the time, my knowledge of John Carpenter was basically what I had read in Fangoria magazine and the few times I had seen him on television. So his name was only a somewhat plus on The Fog. The cover art, however, that green poster with that being standing in the fog, was fairly appealing. Of course, now I own copies of Halloween, Big Trouble in Little China, The Thing, and Vampires, and I'm working on replacing copies of The Fog, Christine, Escape from New York, and a few others that seem to have walked themselves out of my house. Back in the day, the story didn't necessarily super appeal to me. We didn't get fog all that often where I grew up, so the fear of a fog bank moving toward people didn't quite resonate with me, but I was hell-bent on watching every single horror movie ever made, so the fog came home with me. Now, as an adult living near the California coast, it hits quite differently. So, what's the story here? The film opens on a quote from Edgar Allan Poe. "Is all that we see or seem but a dream within a dream?" Then we're shown a pocket watch as a sign of time passing, and then an old man who looks like a sailor appears. He's entertaining children with stories, and he has just one more story to go. As a kid of the 80s, this is very Are You Afraid of the Dark? And it definitely helped sell the movie at the time. The man tells them the story of the 21st of April, years before, in this very location.
21st of April.
We, the audience, get the fog rolling in on screen, the opening credits, and a nicely creepy score in that signature style Carpenter has. The editing to the title card looks fab. Then we get to hear Adrienne Barbeau's distinctive voice on the radio before we move to a church where a handyman is working, then asking for his payment from the priest. This handyman is none other than Carpenter himself, which fans may now find funny that he's asking for payment.
Father, can I get paid?
As the handyman leaves and the priest follows him, a wall starts crumbling and there's something inside of it. Then suddenly, back to the radio lady, Stevie, she's telling a story about what happened 100 years ago in this very bay. The ominous tone is set. Something is up.
It sure beat Chicago.
Now, let's talk talent involved. The film is written by John Carpenter and Debra Hill, who honestly doesn't get enough credit for her work on his films and elsewhere. Carpenter also directed and composed the music, while Hill produced. The two of them were a dream team for a while, and their work together is fantastic. By the time The Fog came out in 1980, John Carpenter was well established already with Dark Star, Assault on Precinct 13, and Halloween already had been released, as well as a few other titles on his resume.
What I hate worse than anything else is pretension in any form. Somebody who's pretentious and is delivering a message. Because I don't think motion pictures is at all intellectual. I think it's all feelings.
Debra Hill, for her part, had co-written Halloween with him, and The Fog was her second credit as a writer and a producer. The two of them were just getting started making cool movies together. Since then, he's become a household name in horror, and she finally seems to be getting the credit and recognition she deserves, by a small woman-owned company called Poltergeist and Paramours, as well as a few other designs out there. The love for Hill is really spreading in the last few years, and with good reason. The cast here is made up of a few familiar faces from horror films, starting off with Tom Atkins as Nick Castle, a character clearly named after the actor who played the Shape in Halloween 1978. Of course, he does well here, and I don't think Atkins is able to turn in a bad or unappealing performance. He's always giving something that is entertaining and helps the films he's in.
Cool. Can I ask you something?
Sure.
What's your name?
Isn't that guy awesome or what?
Playing Elizabeth, the hitchhiker he picks up, is Jamie Lee Curtis, and if she needs an introduction, we can't be friends. Here's one anyway, just in case. For horror fans, Curtis is one of the first Scream Queens, having survived her cinematic brother's constant attacks in the Halloween series starting in 1978. She also is a bona fide Hollywood brat, being the kid of Janet Leigh, who everyone has seen in Psycho, and is in The Fog as Kathy Williams. And her father, Tony Curtis, whose career spanned from 1949 to 2008 with 135 credits. Jamie Lee Curtis is still a huge name in horror and in the industry in general, so seeing her here in a non-Halloween early career role is great. Playing Stevie, our radio host with the most, is Adrienne Barbeau, who is also a mainstay in the horror industry. Her work with Carpenter spanned a few films, and here she's pretty fantastic to watch. Interestingly enough, she also plays a radio host in the wraparound segment of Tales of Halloween, a clear nod to the fog. Her voice work is almost as famous as her acting work.
It's exactly 12 minutes after midnight, and this is Stevie Wayne, your night guide, around until about.
Of course, the rest of the cast is also interesting and peppered with faces horror fans can recognize, such as Charles Cypher, Hall Halbrook, and Nancy Loomis. The effects here are really good and have aged well, something that seems to happen with practical effects. The fog is thick and rolls in just right, creeping into buildings and rooms, making its presence feel like it may be alive. The beings in the fog are clearly designed to be some sort of zombie ghosts, and their design looks like they have been in the fog and humidity for so long. They've decomposed in a very specific way, which looks fantastic here. The use of lights to give the fog color and atmosphere is something that is instantly recognizable and has been imitated multiple times since, not always with great results. The film as a whole looks fantastic, even now. Given that it had a budget estimated at $1 million USD, the filmmakers definitely put the entirety of that money on the screen and it paid off. The film made almost $21.5 million USD at the box office. I'd call that a great return on investment. Of course, Carpenter was just coming off of releasing Halloween in 1978, so the public wanted more. On video, the film seems to have found more of its public, making decent sales once it became available for purchase and on its re-releases. You see, back in the day of video stores, the early days of them, buying a personal copy of a film was something that was really expensive. Think about $80 per VHS tape in the 1980s. That is a lot now, and was even more then. Nowadays, the film can easily be found on DVD and Blu-ray just about anywhere, and even found used for almost nothing. This doesn't mean that it hasn't held up. The fact that it keeps getting re-releases shows that it's still quite popular. For a film released in 1980, the year of my birth, it holds up quite well. It does have some pacing issues, some of the sections are just too long for their own good, and a few too many characters are introduced to keep it from being a truly tight horror film. The effects here are so good and the visuals have stayed relevant, inspiring many filmmakers since its release. The acting fits the film with characters that are a bit dated in how they act and how they are, but it makes sense for the 1980s and it's a good capsule of the time. The fashion is on point, props to the wardrobe department. The decor feels like they got all the right locations and dressed them just right. The outdoor locations are fantastic, with some cinematography that really makes the most of the bay and the fog rolling in.
Go north. Stay away from the fog.
The way the film is shot even distracts, in a good way, from the story itself. The story is good, but could really use a few trims here and there, which is why I don't watch this one as much as, say, Escape from New York.
Call me Snake.
That being said, the film does build some good tension and has some genuinely creepy moments that stay creepy this many years on. It's a good film, but one that could use a tighter cut in this viewer's honest and humble opinion. The film is clearly aged, but it still works, flaws and all. Now the remake from 2005, well, I try to pretend it never happened, for the sake of my mental health and the sake of the cast careers. If you haven't seen the original 1980 The Fog, go get it. Pick it up in a clearance bin near you on DVD or order one of the newer releases. It's good and it's definitely a great film to watch with a group on a dark, humid night. Don't mind me, I'm going to the beach here in San Diego. It's the perfect time of year to watch the fog roll in at night. The marine layer, as they call it here. Watching the world turn creepy in the early evening is just about perfect. Rating The Fog out of 10 at this point in life, it still gets a solid 7 out of 10, which means it's a strong film, has some great effects, but needs a bit of trimming as mentioned before.
And I believe in the CinemaScope there, down the street, it's coming on that side of frame.
I wanted to make a film about the fog as a character, as a force of evil.
And I think that we could get the same kind of response, the highs and the lows and the roller coaster ride that I think Halloween provides. And the fog's not exactly a roller coaster ride, it's more like the whip.
I'm conscious of the press, but I don't make movies for them. I don't make movies to get good reviews. I think that's dangerous.
I want to pack the house and then burn it down.